Margaret, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, Lory. How are you today?
I'm great, and thanks so much for coming on to the Artfest Online Chat. I'm here with Margaret Seaton today from Shardz Art Glass. Shardz Art Glass.
Correct.
Right. And Margaret, you've been a glass artist for many, many years.
Oh gosh, I hate to count.
Yeah. And well, there's amazing things about that. One, you learn you learn and breathe and live glass, and you know things about glass that no one could even imagine, right? And how would you even explain it to somebody who isn't a glass artist? But yeah, so you've done many things in glass over the years, but you really loved seem to fall in love with fused glass. Can you tell us what is fused glass, and tell us a little bit about that?
Fused glass is pretty simple. Really, fused glass is taking different layers of a specialty fusing glass, putting them together into a design, and fusing that design in a kiln so it becomes one solid piece of glass. There's many kinds of fused glass that you can do. There's making plates and bowls and functional things, but I like to focus on the art aspect of fused glass, where instead of building functional pieces, I am building artwork that generally hangs or sits on a table or something like that. Any of those art pieces can be turned into a plate or a bowl, but I tend to focus more on artwork.
So when you say specialty glass, it's not like you can't use like window glass or like.
No, you can't use window glass. You have to use glass that is tested to be compatible with each other. There are different types of fusing glass, and you have to use the one that's tested to be compatible with itself, so that you can buy a sheet of blue glass or a sheet of green glass and put them together and they will fuse because they're compatible. If I used glass that wasn't compatible, when I tried to fuse them, they would break. They would shatter. So you have to be very careful. So it's called a specialty fusing glass. I use system 96, there's system 90, system 104, but I tend to stick with one type.
In the system, is that like different temperatures it melts at, or what makes it different?
And it's the coefficient melting. It's the amount of time at a specific heat that your glass melts, because when you're fusing glass, it has to melt, get soft enough so that the other piece can melt at the same time and fuse together. If I've got two pieces of glass that melt at a different temperature to a certain level of melt, then when they try to fuse together, they would be incompatible and they would break.
Yeah, it's quite involved, isn't it?
So it depends on the heat, the amount of heat you need to melt the glass, and the amount of time it takes to melt the glass. So when I'm fusing glass, I use a program, a computerized kiln, put in specific programs that ramp up my kiln to a certain heat. I hold it there for a certain amount of time, and then it's a very careful and slow ramp down back to the cool process. And so all of that's very specific to the type of glass that you're using.
Wow. So what temperature does your kiln typically run at to melt glass?
I am running probably around 1350 to 1400 degrees for the type of work that I do. Now, if you want to go to, and the work that I do, my work is always texturized or three-dimensional. So that means I don't melt mine until it's completely flattened. You can, so with plates and bowls and things like that, you quite often melt things so that it's completely flat and there's no dimension to the surface. But mine, the dimension is what makes my work special. And so I melt only to a lower temperature than I would do if I was making a plate or a bowl.
Oh, I see. So you have to build the whole piece in one go. And it's not like you melt some and then you add more and then just later you have to build your whole piece and then put it in the kiln. Is that how it works?
Well, quite often my pieces are a work in progress. So you will start with a layer, create it, add the glass. You might then melt that, fuse it, And then your next step might be adding another layer of glass. It all depends on the type of texture you're looking for and the dimension that you're looking for. Some of the more complicated pieces can be fired probably 4 or 5 times before they get to the point where they are a completed piece.
Oh, I see. So, but so you can then. So if you've already fused a few pieces together and you put more on, you put it back at the kiln, you have to melt it till it fuses again.
Yes, and you may change the amount of time and the temperature on the second melt or the third melt, depending on the look and feel that you're wanting to get. I use a lot of crushed glass, which is called glass frit, to make my elements, and I use hand-blown shards of molten glass as various elements in mine. So it's small textures of glass built onto a flat piece of glass that then when they melt together, those elements stay raised in the kiln process.
Oh, I see. Yeah. So I saw in your information though that you pioneered a technique. What is it that you did? Can you explain what you did there? That's new.
Well, it's basically using liquid glass or glass paint, using small shards of glass, crushed glass, using hand-pulled elements of glass to make interesting long stringy things that would go into your piece. So it's using glass powders and crushed glass to build a picture. So for example, if I'm making a tree, I would use liquid glass paint to build the trunk of the tree, and with this special technique that I've developed to create a barky structure on the tree trunk. And then I used crushed glass to build the leaves. So I will select a number of different colors of glass, crush them, bring them together, and then add them to the piece to make the leaves. And that's kind of the basic approach that I am using, but it depends on the piece you're trying to create, the thickness of the crush that you would use, or the different textures with the paint. Sometimes we use mica powder. Sometimes we use mica powder to add embellishment or add shine to the pieces.
Well, when you say hand, like pulled glass, what do you mean by that? Is that you're heating it and pulling it like a separate activity?
That's probably one of the funnest things that I do. Is I have a blowtorch, and I have 2 pieces of 2 strips of glass, one in one hand and one in the other, and I hold them over top the blowtorch. And as they heat in the center, they become molten. And when they become molten in the center, you kind of stick them together, and then you stretch them and pull that molten piece, and that ends up creating these beautiful organic shapes of glass that you can control to a certain degree, but they become very unique and very organic on their own. So then you would use those in different pieces in different manners to create different elements in a piece. For example, some of the stuff that I make is organic grasses. And so you use those beautiful shaped pieces of pulled glass once they've cooled, of course. And then you add other elements, other crushed glass to make like flower petals, or crushed glass to make the centers of flowers, etc. One of the pieces that I really enjoy making are poppies. So I hand paint poppies, but then embellish those poppies with crushed glass to give them texture and dimension. So it's not just a flat painting, but it's a 3-dimensional piece.
Right. So I know I saw that piece that was called Little Poppies. It was called Little. Yeah, there it is. Little Pastel Poppies. That's the one that similar to that kind of a piece. I know
Yes.
different versions of it. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
This one, yeah, the 3 pastel poppies, really pretty.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's quite a different technique, actually.
Thanks. They're one of my favorite things to do. It's, I think with any artist, you love what you do. You love the creation process. And so I just go and lose myself in my work and love it. It's beautiful.
Yeah, well, your work's beautiful, and I know you love. I mean, your work is, like within botanicals and landscapes and things. I was quite astounded actually at how realistic your art pieces look. Like they look. How do you get that? Like it looks like a landscape with like a river and water. Like how do you accomplish that?
Well, sometimes you you paint on the front of the glass, you paint on the back of the glass, you add the elements that I'm talking about, you fire them to create the base structure, and then you would build on top of that with other elements that create the dimension that you're looking for in a landscape piece, so that you really want to create, the three-dimensional look. And the color structure really helps. You use a light glass to create shading over here, or a dark glass to create shading over here. It's really, each piece becomes very different, and it's really building the picture using glass only, adding it to the palette that you're working on to create the very fine detail.
Right. So the painting part, is that when you say glass paint, is that like the kind you buy at Michael's? Like you just you put it in the kiln? No, it's not the same kind of paint. It's a different.
Right. No, it's a specialty. It's really a ceramic paint. So it's really glass based, and it's liquid glass really is what it is. You don't paint in the traditional style with brushes usually. You can, but this paint comes in tubes, and you kind of squeeze and pull and push the glass around. So it all fires, and when you put it in the kiln, it becomes glass attached to glass.
Amazing. And that's the beautiful rich colors too.
Yes, beautiful, beautiful. Now the paint that I use is called glass line paints, and it really is a ceramic based paint. But there is also enamel paints that can be used in glass painting as well, which is a very different process than what I do.
Yeah. So are there some that are transparent and some that are opaque?
Glass paint is always opaque, but different glass can be transparent or opaque. So when you go out to buy glass for fusing, you will buy transparent glass or opaque glass, and each creates a different look and feel in the piece that you're working on.
Okay, so I know that you've been so generous sharing your with all your techniques and your information, and you also do that in your workshops. So I mean, a lot of artists like to keep their techniques and their processes secret because they don't, it's their garden. But you usually like to share it. You have workshops all the time. Tell me about your classes.
Classes are small. I keep my classes to 6 to 8 people, so that we can have a lot of hands-on support. And so generally what I do is I have three workshops where you learn how to use the process that I'm working on and the techniques, and we build pictures together. So I will teach you how to make a tree, and I will teach you how to make the organic grasses. And then basically once you've kind of completed that process, you can then work on your own designs. And the fun of that is people will go home and look on the internet or pictures that they've got or paintings that they've already got and say, I'd like to make that in glass. I'd like to try and see how we can make that in glass. You bring that picture along, and then we figure out how we make that in glass. And it is such a fun process because it allows your own creativity. You're not just making stuff that somebody else designed, but you're now designing your own piece and making it in glass. So you go home with an original piece of art that you love. And to me, that's the joy of teaching, is showing people that this is, you can do it. It's not a big secret. If you have an idea and you have the right tools in front of you and a little bit of understanding about the technique, you go away just completely turned on. And that to me is my joy. I love teaching almost as much as I love making. It's really, really fun.
Yeah, and one of the ingredients you forgot to mention was that you need a good teacher.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. I really love it. My family, we're all teachers, and I think maybe I didn't teach in any of my career, but I think I was a frustrated teacher. So this is my opportunity to do what my family does.
Yeah, and to see your little fledgling glass artists
Yeah,
evolve and grow muscles and grow.
yeah, lots of fun.
Yeah, so I know you do believe in a lot of education of those things, because I saw also that you've taken a lot of workshops yourself to help develop your techniques. And um, rather than like a lot of artists I speak to, they're self-taught artists. They've never taken a workshop. That's a whole different journey. But tell me what it is you love about taking workshops and being involved in the artist community and in the glass art community in general. How's that helped your career?
Do you know what my belief is? That no matter who you're learning from, you are going to learn something from that individual. I started out knowing absolutely nothing, and I find that my journey in glass really has been kind of a progressive one, where I don't know what my end goal is going to be, but I do know that every time I take a new class or a new workshop, or even looking on the internet to find, there's all kinds of stuff out there. Every little bit that you learn at a class adds to your own style and technique. So yes, I may have learned from Patty Gray how to make a sink and a bowl, but I will take what I learned from Patty Gray, elements of that, and then I will use it to expand my technique and my evolution through the art process. So I've taken all kinds of classes, online, in person. I've attended a number of conferences, both in the United States and in Canada. So all of those little elements that you're learning add to your own technique. And I think your love of the journey and what you really enjoy out of that learning process really gets added back into your technique, because you try it and you work it, and sometimes you have mistakes, and really there's no mistakes. It's really just a learning process.
Yeah, and I guess, with glass being so technical, there is a lot of things to really learn.
Yeah.
For being successful in your pieces, and also safety, I guess, too, is another issue. Like, and tell me a little bit about your studio space. Like, do you have, like, a glass studio sounds like something that has to be fairly, like you need a lot of equipment. Like, do you have a studio in your house? Where do you work?
I call my studio, where there's a will, there's a way, because it's a very small studio space. My studio shares my laundry room, or part of my studio shares my laundry room. So my winter working space is down the basement in my laundry room, and I've got floor to ceiling. There's stuff packed in there. My husband is such a great guy at building little places for storage and whatnot. But I also have half of our garage that I use for classes generally, and that's where my kilns are. So we have a big work table. People hang around the work table. We've all got the tools and stuff in the center space. But I've got grinder. You have to have grinders, and you have to have kilns. I have 3 kilns now that I use different processes. You have wet saws that you will use, and because my space is small, I kind of have to take things out and put them away as we need them, but they're all there. Yeah. And so we can have 6 to 8 people. Now with COVID though, we're going to have to reduce the size of classes. I'm going to try and start classes again, but I think we're probably looking at maybe 3 to 4 people is going to be the optimum size now with COVID and having to have special restrictions for space, etc.
Lots of changes right now, isn't there?
Yeah, for sure.
With the kilns, are they like electric kilns or gas? Like, do you have to have special power? If someone want to put a kiln in their house, let's say, and play around with it with glass, do you tell me a little bit about the setup with that?
So it depends. You can get kilns that are 120 volt that just plug into a normal circuit. I have one of those, and I use it quite often when I'm making jewelry and small things. But I also have a much larger kiln that I use for student work or larger pieces, and that's a 240 kiln, so you have to have dedicated wiring for that.
Okay.
I use, there are two kinds of kilns really. There are glass kilns and there are pottery kilns. Pottery kilns have to be vented, whereas a glass kiln does not. So same idea, you've got coils and elements in there that are heating up, but because of the greenware in pottery, you have to be able to vent that, but not with a kiln. Kilns you can have a manual heating dials, or you can have a computerized process, which is what I generally use. A kiln firing process takes probably 12 to 14 hours. And so there are various stages that the kiln process goes through that have to be very carefully controlled. And you do that with a computerized program.
Right. Is that where the term annealing comes in?
Yes, annealing is actually the time when glass is going back, cooling down, and it has to be cooled down in a very slow, controlled process. So the cooling time would probably be half of the time. So it takes half of the time to ramp up and do the melting process, and then it takes the same amount of time to cool the glass down. If you try and cool it down too fast, your glass will break.
Yeah. Sure, you've had a few accidents in your kiln after all the trials you've done.
Just a few. But you know what? In glass, nothing's ever a lost case, because you can always take that glass and use it again. And quite often I've had oops in the kiln. I've taken whatever that oops piece is, set it aside, and it's amazing how it comes back when you're working on another piece. You say, you know what, that piece that broke over there might look really nice on this piece, and then you can bring them together. So nothing's ever lost. And it's always a learning experience. Okay, why did that break, and what do I have to do so it doesn't happen again? So it's all part of a big process.
Yeah, and then that's just one part of your craft, really, because then you have to take your finished pieces and you have to mount them and frame them. So, and glasses, I wouldn't even know. I don't know how to mount glass. How do you get it ready to sell, for example, in the gallery?
Well, I do all of my own framing. And I'm very particular about the type of framing that I use on each piece. And I search for a particular frame for every piece that I make. It has to be just right. Because to me, that's what sets a piece off, is the framing. Yeah, the glass piece is nice, but it's amazing what a difference a really nice frame will make on that. So quite often I'm searching antique stores, secondhand stores, etc., for framing that I also redo. So I will, sand it down and refinish it, either varnish it or paint it, etc. And then you are pretty much gluing the glass piece into the frame with a specialty glue. Okay. So that's, yeah, and the glue is amazing, unless I'm doing a very big install. That's how we're using a special glue. Yeah,
and you don't cover it up with glass, because it's the face, so you get to see all the texture and
Generally, what I do when I have a frame, I will mount the glass on the top of the glass that's already in a frame.
Right.
So that you've got the glass background with the glass piece mounted on top of the glass.
Yeah.
And then behind the glass that's already on the picture, on the frame, you would put in a complementary matting that you want to have with your piece.
Right. Yeah, well, their presentation is beautiful too, and you have wonderful work. I love the variety. You've got a lot of there's a nice. It's not like it's all over the map. It's a nice collection, but you got lots to choose from.
Thank you.
I'm really happy to have you part of our Artfest shop, and I'm very excited about having you be in our store. And you have a special on for our event this weekend, which is a 15% off when you buy a second piece. And is that what it is? And also your workshops.
Yeah.
you're promoting work.
Absolutely.
So where are you located? You're in Peterborough, right?
Peterborough, Ontario, yes.
Yeah. So so if people wanted to have a workshop, they could get a hold of you and book it.
Yeah.
Book it.
Peterborough is a great place to come through for a day. Come stay in one of our beautiful hotels and enjoy the time here. It's a lovely place.
Yeah. So is it usually a one-day workshop kind of thing you do? Or
Workshops are probably about 4 hours. So you come, you get here around 10 o'clock, and we're usually done about 2:33. Although there's never a really hard stop time. If you're not finished, you stay until you're done.
right, and then you don't. You have all the materials there. You don't have to bring anything or.
No, everything is there. Every single thing that you need. But
Yeah.
then you have to pick your piece up 2 days later because remember I have to fire it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's been great chatting with you, and a delight to meet you on our video here, and nice to see your face because we.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Very nice to talk to you too. I hope everybody enjoys the festival. I know there's been a lot of work that's gone into putting this together, and it's going to be. This is your first one, right? Like this?
Yes, I did a bit of a trial run in May for our May event canceled.
Oh, okay.
So I had a bit of practice there, learned what worked, what didn't.
Cool.
Made some changes, and it's still a work in progress a little bit, but and I'm learning every day. You know, I wish we had like a huge production, you know, the resources to do that, but that's the way it works. Art festivals generally, we're always kind of struggling for
That's for sure.
put these events on, and yeah. So
Well, it has been an absolute pleasure working with you. So I've really enjoyed your kind, your responsive, your helpful, everything. You're great to work with. So I really much appreciate that. This is my first time doing anything like this. So it's been a learning experience as well.
yeah, well, we'll both be pros by the end of it, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Thanks, Lory.
Okay.
Bye now.